Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College Football Payoff podcast. It's our first episode. Dan, joined as always with Big Country here. And this podcast, we're going to go through the college football games of the week and pick what we think are locks to help you win a little money. It's a little different this year. You know, games are... Not all the games are being played as scheduled. You don't have the big games just yet. So we're picking and choosing throughout the board to see what we can come up with. No Big Ten just yet. We got SEC coming when next week.
Yeah, 1 week from today.
1 week from today, we got the SEC. So today, you know, we got a few teams you may know. Nothing too big. We do have a matchup between two ranked teams on the board, Miami and Louisville. But other than that, we're going to get right into it. But first, we did want to talk about the Big Ten, didn't we? Because some news came out today.
Yeah, news breaking today that the Big Ten is reinstating the football season. They're going to start on October 24th. Me personally, I've been bashing Kevin Warren every day on Twitter for the past month, just saying that he's incompetent. The Big Ten should have been playing this whole time. I understand the Pac-12 not playing because having to deal with all the West Coast schools, but there was just no excuse at all for the Big Ten not being able to play. And on top of that, even though they do have 8 games scheduled, the season's actually going to be pretty difficult for them to pull it off due to their own procrastination. In my opinion, they should have started on October 10th rather than October 24th. Currently, they have 8 games in a row scheduled for each team, 4 home and 4 away. And some rules and stipulations for COVID-19 that the Big Ten imposed are going to be no more than 5% of your team can have COVID at one time, or you have to take a whole week off. If a player does contract COVID-19, they have to be away from the program for 21 days. And rules like these are going to make it really hard for teams to actually complete a full 8-team season. If they would have started on October 10th rather than October 24th, they would have been able to have 2 slot weeks that could have held as bye weeks, but also could have been makeup game weeks. So we'll see if the Big Ten is even included in the College Football Playoff this year. But I'm just happy that we have games on the schedule.
Yeah, and it's going to be nice to finally be able to see, you know, what Ohio State can do, what Penn State can do, and it sounds like they're going to be able to be a part of the College Football Playoff. But I mean, it's cutting it very close because you got to finish at a certain time, and if you have no bye weeks in there, you know, if one team in the Big Ten can't play, that affects other teams, and that'll affect them trying to get into the playoffs. So it's going to be a challenge, but all in all, we're happy that football's back, and you know, we can watch other conferences play rather than, you know, the FCS schools, which I wasn't complaining, but let's
better
face
than
it,
nothing.
Yeah, we want to see some good football.
Yeah, and the Sun Belt, SEC, and ACC has provided, or ACC and Big 12 has provided that so far. You know, as a gambler, this actually kind of plays to our advantage because we get to focus on only 3 conferences at a time. We'll introduce the SEC in 2 weeks. We'll be able to focus on that, and then in a whole month we'll be able to focus on the Big Ten. So it actually kind of helps gamblers with their research by being able to, you know, compartmentalize what conferences they're focusing on or at what points in the season.
Right. So we should be making some money then, is what you're saying. All right.
Before we start, we all know who's going to win the Big Ten, but who's going to get second place in the Big Ten this year?
I mean, I don't know how are they going to do the playoff? Because it's 8 games straight through, right?
Right. Yeah. Supposedly.
So I would think it's the top 2 teams are in the playoff or in the championship for the
right. Who's
the Big Ten? It's going to be Ohio State, Penn State.
Penn State. Yeah, that's what I think too.
Ohio State, Penn State, and
Penn State's a big sleeper team this year. I do think Ohio State has a lot more talent, but Penn State always finds a way to win those big games. So
yeah, and as far as the Michigan teams and everyone else, it's kind of just
I don't even think they want to play.
No, Michigan doesn't want to play.
Yeah,
but here we are. They voted unanimously. So Ohio State, Penn State, Big Ten championship. That's our prediction.
Yes.
All right. So let's go ahead and we'll get into our picks. So we'll alternate games. We do have a few where we both have plays in the same game, whether it be together or against each other. But I'm going to go ahead and start. Let's go with 12 o'clock game, Navy at Tulane. All right, we got Tulane as a 7-point favorite. So last week, Navy, they had a very bad loss, 55-3 to BYU.
The coach was apologizing at halftime.
Yeah.
Not having his guys ready.
And they weren't ready. They did not practice tackling before the season. Like, they did not do any football drills before the season started.
Right.
And it showed. They looked lost. They had no idea what was going on out there. And frankly, I think it will take longer than 2 weeks for Navy to get ready and get their defensive and offensive lines ready to play a game. We know that if you take a few weeks off or if you take a month off, you got to condition yourself in football. And I think 2 weeks is too long. I don't think they will be ready for this game. Tulane coming off a win just last week. Granted, it was against Southern Alabama, but
yeah, they were pretty good this year, actually. I mean, that South Alabama's putting out the best team they have in a decade. So
and they showed it. They showed it against Tulane. South Alabama actually outplayed them for 3 quarters. But then in the fourth quarter, Tulane, their quarterback Keon Howard, they turned it around. They got settled in, and they really started playing well. So Navy, I think, needs a few more weeks to turn all their problems around, what with tackling and learning the plays and offensive, defensive line.
They're just a really young team. I mean, last year that quarterback they had ran that offense to perfection. So having to start from square one, and especially in what day and age we're in right now in the midst of COVID-19, the world's doing Navy no favors right now.
That's true. And Navy, they are an option team. They do not pass. Their running game is going to get better each week, but Tulane's defensive line was just unstoppable last game. I mean, they gave up 65 yards rushing. Now, I know a heavy option team is going to run a lot more. They'll gain more than 65 yards, but Navy only had 149 yards total last game, and 119 of them were through the run. So, I don't know. I think Tulane shuts them down on defense. I think Navy still cannot tackle. I think Keon Howard will tear them apart, and I think Tulane will win pretty handedly. So I'm taking Tulane -7.
-7. Mm-hmm. Okay. Up to Huntington, West Virginia, where we're going to have Appalachian State take on the Marshall Thundering Herd. In this game right now, Appalachian State's laying 4.5 points. Right off the bat, I took Appalachian State last week at -17. They ended up only winning by 15 against Charlotte. A little bit of them shooting their own selves in the foot, but also a good rushing team in Charlotte they had to face, which is a really good Week 1 experience for them going into this going in to face this Marshall team. Marshall had 5 wide receivers go for over 40 yards against Eastern Kentucky 2 weeks ago. From this, what this tells me is that there's not necessarily a stud on that offense, rather than when they were faced up against Eastern Kentucky, they were winning the majority of every one-on-one battle on that field. They did end up beating Eastern Kentucky pretty harshly, and gaining 282 yards on the ground for them. But, I'm not really worried about that, as Appalachian State against Charlotte last Saturday ran for 308 yards, had 2 running backs that had 100-plus yards. They have Williams Jr., Peoples, and Harrington in the backfield for a really good rushing attack. It's really a 3-headed monster. And on top of that, they have their top 3 wide receivers and their top quarterback back for this year. So they pretty much have all the dynamic weapons on offense that they need to have. They do have a first-year coach, but he's pretty familiar with the program. He's been a player at Appalachian State. He coached them in the bowl game last year. There's a lot more continuity in Appalachian State than what you see on paper. And then, Marshall's quarterback against Eastern Kentucky threw for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns in his first start as a true freshman ever. Like I said, I think this is more because they're playing Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky's kind of going on a shame tour this year as they're just filling in for every big-name school who needs a cupcake game in the beginning of the year. And, Eastern Kentucky did also give up 329 rushing yards to WVU last week. With WVU suspending 11 players an hour before kickoff. So I really don't think that Marshall was really put to a real test with Eastern Kentucky, and that their score of 59-0 from 2 weeks ago is probably more of an illusion. I'm going to rock with Appalachian State here, -4.5. Lock it in.
All right, you do like Appalachian State, and I mean, every year you find out Appalachian State's not just the team who won and done Michigan, that one year, but they actually do come out and play pretty good football.
Yeah, since they've bumped up to FBS, they've been a really dominant program, especially down in the Carolinas.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see them a lot more when we further on down the road when we make some picks. Next game, let's see here. Let's go to Atlanta, UCF at Georgia Tech. It's a 3:30 kick. Looks like UCF favored by 7.5. I'm taking Georgia Tech, the underdogs at 7.5. Few things. I mean, UCF, this is their first game, and I don't care. People can say first game, they're hyped up, they're ready to go. Other side of the coin is first game, you got to work out a lot of kinks, errors, whatnot, and who knows how they've been practicing during all the COVID. Georgia Tech last week, huge game, huge win against Florida State.
Yeah.
That game was delayed for quite a while too, and Georgia Tech still found a way to win at Tallahassee, even when they had fans in the stands. Georgia Tech, they have been that option offense for years, right? And now this year they've moved more to a spread, and they have an athletic quarterback actually, Jeff Sims, who he runs. He can throw the ball well on the run. Yeah, he had a couple of picks last week, but that's a freshman quarterback for you. As he starts to progress, he's going to be able to look off defenders. But the running as a quarterback in college is what you need. He uses his legs to make open field, and he can find receivers, throw it on the run, get down to him. Georgia Tech also 3-0 all-time against UCF. Last game was in 2000, granted, but they won 21-17.
I didn't even know UCF had a program back then.
Yeah, well, Georgia Tech did. They beat them. UCF, their defense, yeah, they're good. But at the same time, they only have one game film of the new Georgia Tech offense, right? They may have you got to throw all the other films you had of Georgia Tech from years past. You got to throw them out because they're not running that option anymore.
Right.
It's a spread offense. It's different. In UCF, yeah, they can score fast, but what Georgia Tech can do, they can get the ball, they can control the clock. So we're not necessarily saying Georgia Tech's going to win this game, but they're going to control it. They'll drive down, they'll sustain drives. They'll keep it close. I can see UCF, probably coming out really fast, really hot, and then hitting a wall later in the game.
Yeah.
And that's when Georgia Tech kind of, brings them down to earth, gets the game back close, and they could sneak a win, but I don't see it. I see them at least covering, and Georgia Tech, their passing defense is pretty damn good. They kept Florida State to 4.4 yards per pass last week. All right. And I don't know. I think Georgia Tech getting the points, maybe they win, but I'm not going to put anything on the money line for this one.
I think this is the only game on the card that we disagree on. I am going to rock with Central Florida -7.5 for this game.
Right.
But here's why. I will shout out Georgia Tech for last week. I bet the +400 money line. Thank you very much. But there was a lot of uncertainty and weird factors in that game that just pulls me away from supporting them this week. They do have a freshman quarterback, Jeff Sims. He's a great talent. He's a raw talent. He did throw 2 picks. Another thing that I saw before the delay, which seemed like to last forever, Florida State was up 10-0 going into that point. So I'm not sure if it actually affected the game, but it's just another factor that's pulling me away from Georgia Tech. They also had 3 turnovers, or forced 3 turnovers, and only won by 3. I know they have a newer coaching staff, a young team, but you're not going to win bigger games against better opponents if you're not going to take care or not take advantage of that turnover margin. And then, when you look back at Central Florida, they're returning 70% of their starting guys. They have Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, who averaged 551 yards per game last year, and he was second in the nation among quarterbacks in yards per game. I just know how fast-paced Central Florida is, and I actually think that they're in a better position to play Georgia Tech this week rather than last week because they actually do have that 1 week of game film. If they didn't have that against the new Georgia Tech offense, I'd probably be thinking a little bit differently about this game, but I'm just going with what I know from last year's UCF team. I expect them to come back stronger, since they're a little more tenured, maybe take advantage of a few of Georgia Tech's mind lapses that they get from just being young players. So just mark me down for Central Florida -7.5.
Yeah, and I mean, you say the delay. Yeah, they go up. They're down 10-0, but Georgia Tech didn't take the delay as let's lay down. They rallied behind it.
Right.
It's just Florida State.
Florida State might have
at a home field.
They've just been so disappointing the last couple years. I mean, ever since even before Jimbo Fisher left, ever since Jameis Winston left, really, they've just been not exciting to watch. The recruiting has been lackluster, or at least the recruiting and development has been lackluster because they have been getting really good guys. But man, they've been switching coaches. I do appreciate Georgia Tech's money line last week, but it just doesn't impress me as much as it should have.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like Georgia Tech, but we'll see. I have a feeling we'll have a lot more fights throughout the year, but we'll see on that one.
I think it's our only one today.
Yeah, I do. All right, so what do you got next?
All right, we're taking it down to Duke. They're facing BC, Boston College. Duke's laying 5.5 points on the game. If you watched them last week, they did lose 27-13 to Notre Dame. But going into the fourth quarter, they held in very strong for 3 quarters in that game. It was 17-13 going into the fourth quarter. Their new quarterback, Chase Bryce, had an okay game. I mean, I think it's a plus since it was against that Notre Dame defense. He threw 20 for 37, 259 yards, no touchdowns, but also no picks. He had a passer rating or a quarterback rating around 66, 67. And they did cover against Notre Dame last week. I think they'll be able to, with that week of experience, also be able to exploit some of Boston College's weaknesses. Boston College does have a first-year head coach. That means a lot more this year than it would at any other year, especially if they weren't able to get in those precious spring practices. They have a new quarterback at the helm, Phil Jakovic. I knew this kid in high school, or I watched him in high school. I didn't personally know him, but he was a beast. He's transferred from Notre Dame, couldn't get the starting job there, didn't want to stay behind Ian Book. So he's at Boston College, but really not that much experience at the D1 level. They lost their leading rusher, and they had one of the worst defenses in the league last year. So if that's what this first-year coach inherited, it's not something that I can, lay money on. With Chase Bryce being a transfer from Clemson, going to Duke, who has a great coaching staff, but also coming from a Dabo Swinney staff, I just got to rock with Duke here. They impressed me too much last week to turn my head the other way. Give me the Blue Devils -5.5.
I mean, I'm going to stay away. I can't do anything Duke unless it's basketball. Duke does not. Yeah. Until they start proving for a solid year or 2 years that they belong in college football, I can't roll with them in anything but basketball. Yes. So I'm staying away from that, and I am going to go to Pittsburgh, Syracuse at Pitt. Noon kickoff. Pittsburgh, 22-point favorites. I'm taking Pittsburgh. I'm taking it. Syracuse, again, they're just not a good team. It's tough to watch them play football sometimes. Last week, lost 31-6 to North Carolina. Their offense just can't move the ball. And the offensive line last year was atrocious. Almost as bad as how they were last week against North Carolina. Last week, Syracuse gave up 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and let's see, 68. Oh, they only had 68 rushing yards. So we're talking about the offensive line just cannot get a push on anybody. 68 rushing yards. 30 of those rushing yards were by their quarterback.
Yeah.
That was the leading rusher.
They also had a former fullback starting at, I think, left tackle.
Yeah, so
last week,
there's problems there, isn't there?
Big problems.
Syracuse 4-9 against the spread dating back to last season. So,
and their quarterback Tommy DeVito is supposed to be really good. I stayed away from that game last week just because I was worried about him. Man, he got benched, so I really don't know which way Syracuse turns now.
you can be a good quarterback, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't have an offensive line.
Exactly.
So, in Pittsburgh, just their pass rushing was one of the best in 2019, and the only person they lost was their defensive tackle, Amir Watts. They're returning Jalen Twyman, Patrick Jones II. Those are both defensive linemen. And they're returning Paris Ford, their safety. They're all Nagurski watch listers. This defense is good for Pittsburgh. And if Syracuse can't move the ball and Pittsburgh's defense is that good, you can look at a very low-scoring game for Syracuse. And
that Paris Ford, the safety for Pittsburgh, is a ridiculous athlete. He'll be a first-rounder, if not this year, next year. He's a ridiculous athlete, along with DeMar Hamlin back there also. Those guys make a really good tandem at safety. I like Pitt a lot here. I just don't have the faith in Kenny Pickett at quarterback there. So.
I mean, he threw two touchdowns against Syracuse last year.
Right, yeah.
I think this year he throws at least 3.
He's much improved, too.
All right, yeah, he'll throw at least 3, and you'll mix in maybe a couple either rushing touchdowns or don't be surprised for a nice defensive touchdown as well. So I'm taking Pittsburgh minus 22.
Awesome. All right, we're down at Clemson now. They are hosting the Citadel Academy this week. Just right off the bat, I saw this line at minus 45.5. Now I see it at minus 48.5. As long as that line stays under 49 points, I'm going to roll with Clemson here. I know you're shaking your head at me here.
Ridiculous.
But this is why I'm rolling with Clemson. And it's not because Clemson impressed me last week against Wake Forest, which they did not at all. They didn't cover for me. Their backups were looking bad. It would actually that performance alone almost steered me away from taking Clemson this week. But then on Sunday, I was going through the box score for the Citadel versus South Florida game. Get this. The Citadel, on pass attempts, completed 4 out of 18 passes for a total of 84 yards and 1 interception. This is against South Florida. On top of that, they did rush for 200 yards, but it was off of 54 carries. What they were trying to do in this whole game, they didn't want to be out on the field against South Florida. And this is a South Florida team with a first-year head coach who is not stacked with talent. They really just took advantage, ran the ball 54 times, and tried to run out the clock. I don't know how they got out of there with even scoring 6 points and only allowing 27. But you can bet this week I'm also probably going to take a look at the first half line, maybe the first quarter lines. But I wouldn't be surprised if this game is 35-0 at the end of the first quarter. I mean, Clemson's going to come out, smack them. Citadel does not want to be there. I'm rocking with Clemson this week off of that alone. And also, the twos at Clemson that are going to be subbed in the second half here, they're not going against the ones at Wake Forest this week. They're going against the ones at the Citadel, maybe the twos by that time in the game. And these guys just don't match up in talent compared to Clemson. So, mark me down for any line of Clemson that's under 49.
And that's what I was going to ask you was the first half, do you think they cover? Because in the second half, you're going to see your backups. You're not going to see Trevor Lawrence. But at the same time, you're going to see Clemson's backups, which I'm sure would be star players at the Citadel or any team the Citadel plays.
Exactly. And, the backups, the twos really did not impress me against Wake Forest whatsoever. It's just that I'll have more faith in them this week after having some game experience under the belt, 1, then 2, they're going against the Citadel. So they're not even going to be close to the talent on the other side of the ball. So I feel pretty comfortable with this Clemson pick here.
All right. Clemson, any line under 49. Okay, let's go. Let's go to that top 25 matchup.
It's the big game of the week.
Yep, number 17 Miami at number 18 Louisville. I actually have two plays here. This is a 7:30 kick. I'm going Louisville minus 2.5, and I'm playing the over 64.5.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, right off the bat, I look at what they did last week. Both teams put up 30 plus. Miami 31-14 against UAB. Louisville 35-21 against Western Kentucky. Last year, Louisville had a very high scoring offense. They scored 32 points a game.
Yes.
Miami scored 22 a game. Obviously, they started to ramp it up towards the end of the season. These two teams actually did play each other last year, with Miami beating Louisville 52-27. So it's high scoring.
Yes,
Okay.
but I don't see that victory margin
No.
even coming close this year. I think it's going to be a lot closer of a game.
Yeah, I can see a closer game, but I can also see a lot of points being scored in this
Yes.
game. Louisville 8-5 against the spread last year. Miami was 6-7. Louisville also hit the over 8 out of 13 times. Their quarterback. So this game, you're going to have two of the most athletic quarterbacks playing in this game, and that's what's going to bring out all the points. All right, you got Michael Cunningham for Louisville, who last week threw for 343, 3 touchdowns.
Great
he also
talent.
ran for a touchdown.
Yeah, he's a ridiculous dual threat quarterback.
And I think he is more athletic than the Miami quarterback,
Yeah,
Derek King.
I agree. And there's so much hype around Derek King. I think that the hype around him's getting lost in the numbers a little bit.
The hype around him and being at Miami.
Yeah. I would honestly have this line closer to like 5 or 6 points, maybe 6.5. I think honestly he's the sole reason that this is. It started at a Louisville -1, so I really think he's the sole reason that people are wagering on Miami.
Yeah, and Miami's pass rushing. They have to put some pressure on this quarterback, try to get sacks on him, get him flustered. But last week against UAB, they only had 1 sack.
Right.
So I don't see them doing much in regards to defense.
And also on top of that, Miami's #1 projected defensive end opted out of this season, so they're working with some two type talent on that starting D line.
Yeah, and there's athletes on both teams on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, we talked about the two quarterbacks. In Miami, they have Cameron Harris, their running back, last week, 134, 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver at Louisville, Des Fitzpatrick, 4 catches, 110 yards, touchdown.
Yeah.
It's going to be a shootout. There's going to be a lot of points scored. So I'm going to take the over 64.5. I think they shatter that. And Louisville -2.5.
I am going to stay away from that over, but I do agree with you 100% on that Louisville -2.5. Just some trends for you. Miami is 5-11 against the spread. Their last 16 away games. They're not a team that travels well. And then Louisville is also 4-0 against the spread with their last 4 home games. So just a couple trends that are in our favor here. But also something that's alarming to me is that when checking the money today out on these teams, 66% of the money is on Louisville. So right when it gets up to those points, that 66-67% range where 2/3 of the money is on a certain team, I definitely like to look to fade the public in that aspect, but I just see too much talent on Louisville to not win this game. They had like Dan said, they had 2 wide receivers that caught more than 100 yards last week, and none of those guys are named Tutu Atwell, which is their best wide receiver. There's going to be a lot of attention brought away from him now that Louisville has established wide receivers that Miami knows they have to cover. So expect for him to have a big game. That Michael Cunningham is a ridiculous dual threat quarterback. Give me Louisville -2.5. I feel pretty good with that.
So first week, we already have a fight against each other, and we already have a lock with each other.
Yes.
All right. So we'll keep track of those throughout the season as well, see how well we do against and with each other. Do you got any more? What else you got for me?
Yeah, I'm not going to submit this as an official pick, but if you're looking for any money line value this week, I would definitely say for me it lies with the Houston Cougars. I'm pretty familiar with Dana Holgerson's offense down there, as he was the former head coach at West Virginia. He's returning a lot of starters on that team, and also going into week 2 of this NCAA football season, teams that had more spring practices than their opponents were 6-2 against the spread. So a number that's just glaring at me off of my sheet here is that Houston had 7 spring practices while Baylor had 0. Baylor's also bringing in a new coach that is just simple. I mean, he's a great coach. He's a D coordinator at LSU last year, but with everything going on with COVID-19, not being able to have those super valuable spring practices, I think he's definitely behind schedule. And on top of that, the coach that Baylor had last year was a freak of football. I mean, Matt Rule, he's ridiculous. He's the head coach of the Panthers now. So they're losing a bunch on their defense and their head coach that was up for coach of the year last year. If you're looking for a money line play, look to sprinkle Houston. I think it's plus 170 right now. So
all right, so we're gonna. And that's what we'll do each week. We'll have at least one game apiece where we're going to sprinkle money line. I like to do it. So, looking at the games this week, one kind of jumped out to me a little bit more than the others, and that's Louisiana Tech at Southern Mississippi. All right, we got a 7:30 game. Louisiana Tech, it's their first game. Okay, so you don't know what you're going to get with them. I'm not picking them based on it being their first game. I'm picking them based on what's going on with Southern Mississippi.
Right.
Last week, a horrible loss.
Embarrassing.
I mean, 32-21 to South Alabama. So they lost last week. They were huge. They were 12.5-point favorites. They lose. What happens 4 days later? Head coach is gone.
Yeah, if you lose to South Alabama, you have to resign.
So head coach is gone 4 days after. Yeah. After your first game, 4 days after your first game, in basically a landscape that we've never seen before with college football, you lose your head coach.
They were favored by 2 touchdowns,
and they lost.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
they lost by 11 points.
Yeah,
so
I think 25-point flip there on the line. I don't think Southern Mississippi is a team with any value this year, especially after losing their head coach.
Right. So Louisiana Tech, I mean, coming out first game, their first game was actually postponed because of COVID. So I feel like they've been practicing, but they had that little setback. I don't think it hinders them as much as a team who just lost their head coach and now has to play for someone completely different after losing a terrible game. I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit. It's going to be Louisiana Tech. I think I can get them. Last I checked was plus 185. So Louisiana Tech plus 185. Throw a little on there. Make a little extra money this week. So you got anything else at all?
No, I think I got all my locks in. You want to review?
Sure. You can go first.
All right, so for this week, Big Country Bets official picks. Appalachian State minus 4.5. University of Central Florida minus 7.5. Duke minus 5.5. Clemson minus 48.5. And Louisville minus 2.5.
All right, and then let's see. I got Tulane minus 7. Pittsburgh minus 22. Georgia Tech plus 7.5. The over 64.5 at Miami Louisville. Also Louisville minus 2.5. And then little sprinkle for the money line is Louisiana Tech plus 185.
Sounds good. Let's have a good week. Let's make some money. Let's get our units up.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a long season. A lot of research is going to go into this. A lot of research has already been executed on this. Let's ride.
I'm ready, man. Are you?
Yeah. Remember to like, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Big Country Bets. Follow Dan on Twitter at The Accountant Bets. Follow the podcast on Twitter at College Football Playoff Pod.
College Football Payoff. We'll fix that.
Yeah,
it's College Football Payoff Pod. And we'll be coming at you every single week with our picks, our locks, and any news that breaks during this season for college football.
Catch us on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes,
Anywhere you
can
get-
stream. So.
Anywhere you get your podcast, we will be there. So, all right. Well, that'll do it. First episode down. We'll see you next week for Big Country. I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the football this week.